evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Audrey Stoltz, and I'm a student here at Chesapeake College and a recent graduate of the honors program here at the college. And I just want to thank you again for joining us this evening. Now that you have been able to see and hear Kirk's amazing story on the screen, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to the man himself. So please give a warm Eastern Shore welcome to activist and inspirational speaker, Mr. Kirk Noble Bloodsworth.
Oh, come on, sit down. That turned out pretty good. I'm looking in the background. Tim Junkin, where are you at? Tim Junkin, calling Tim Junkin. Well, you moved on us. Tim Junkin, who wrote my book, he's in the audience. He is a local Eastern Shore man. They want us to sign some after you get out, so you can't go nowhere. I'd like to tell you all that I don't smoke anymore. I haven't smoked in 2 years this December, so I'm pretty proud of that. And watching this film 100 times made me quit. But I want to thank you all for coming out. And, you know, it seems like a lot of people talk about the Eastern Shore and the men and women from where we live and where we come from, but it's some of the best bunch that I ever knew in my life. I've got some of my family down here, Jay and Justin and Jason, and it's 3 J's there. But my 2 nephews and their father and several other. My dad is in the audience. He was 88 years old. Where are you at, Pops? There he is, right here. He's that handsome man that was next to me in that picture. I really don't. I think the movie says it all. Finally, after our book has been out for 10 years, and finally I had to last because I've been public speaking now for 23 years, and but what you say about the Eastern Shore people, man, we can always tell a good story. So I just wish it wasn't what it was, and it turned out to be. Now, I have to tell you that it's out on DVD, and you can buy it at Walmart, Target, or any of those places to go online and get it. And we want to tell everybody about the film. It's been out a year now, and it took us 4 years to make. And Gregory Bain, I think, did an excellent job. I'm pretty housed. And even the governor let me go to the old prison and film out there before they tore it down. I've been doing this a long time. And the reason why I help end the death penalty in this state was because I look out over this audience, and if it can happen to an honorably discharged Marine, it can happen to anybody here. And whether you agree with the death penalty or not is immaterial to me. I don't want you to have to go through what I did. And guess what? So you'll never have to do that, and because it's gone. And I hope it stays gone forever. Now, I'm asked to take some questions. Anybody's got any, please? You want this? Okay. You might need that. But so ask away. Yes, I got one right here. This lady had her hand up first. You're next, sir. This lady right here in the front row. My pleasure. My pleasure.
So my question to you is, how did you manage to? I'm loud.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
I want to know, how is it that you managed emotionally and mentally, even though everybody was saying that you did it, because you knew you thought you did it? How did you manage to rise above that?
Well, I was innocent. I was an innocent man, and by God's grace, if you look at the Bible, and Joseph suffered through similar slings and arrows like that. He wound up running Egypt at one point. And so, I just kept my head up, and my mother, she would always tell me never to back off. If you're an innocent man, you tell them what's up. And we lived that. My dad said the same thing. You don't mess around with that stuff. And by God's grace, I stand here before you. Yes, sir. You got to hit a button on that, I think.
If you were given the choice, or what would you like to see done if there was one thing in the criminal justice system to improve the criminal justice systems? What would you personally like to see?
I think the death penalty should be abolished in the United States. And that's a long laundry list for me. Witness identification procedures that are far better than what we have to date. You have double-blind sequential testing. It can be done now. That's a lot better. Not to rely on a lot of this junk science that we knew. I don't know if you've seen the credits, but I dedicated some of it to Chris Conover. Was a man I was in prison with. He did 19 years for hair comparison testing. And they said both head hairs they found at the crime scene on a triple homicide were his. And not only were they not his, they were two different head hairs. Hair comparison testing doesn't work. Same with ballistics. A lot of different things we knew 20, 30, 40 years ago just don't work. And we need to change some of that stuff. But, and accountability. If a prosecutor or a police officer knowingly withholds evidence, or a defense attorney for that matter, withholds evidence about another suspect, there should be some punitive damages. Man, pull his license or hers and not let them practice. And I think it's, we have to be accountable. We just can't, our system of criminal justice is adversarial in nature. It cannot be adversarial to the truth. And so, tell you the truth, it'll set you free. That's what they tell me. Yes, sir, down here in front. Yep.
Yeah, you can probably hear me. I'm pretty loud. If on the same lines what he's talking about.
You're next, okay.
You managed to advocate, you managed to get the law changed about the death penalty. I know you're going to continue speaking, but it reminds what you're saying. If you could pick out one thing now, since you've already accomplished that one thing with the death penalty, what one thing in the criminal justice system would you advocate for right now to continue to do the same thing that you did with the death penalty?
Well, we need to decriminalize a lot of laws. I think that's one of the first things. Our prisons are packed with people that have no business in there, for smoking a little weed. I mean, and I'm not condoning any of that. But what I'm saying is that we need to get away from this pound of flesh thinking we do and start educating people in the ways that the criminal justice system will work. We've got 20,000 prisons in the state of Maryland, close to it. And, we're building prisons left and right. And prisons are being built around prisons that were built. And we have to get away from that. This mass incarceration has to stop. We have to start doing some policy changes that's really going to work. I think we could lighten the load. It's cost a lot of money, and legalize marijuana and get away from all this crap that we're doing. And I'm not telling everybody give people just a ticket to do what they want, but certainly, like prohibition back in the day with alcohol, we could get away from that. It would cause a lot less problems. And so I'm for decriminalization of a lot of things. And the other thing is, the state of Maryland spent $6 million in prosecuting me, in which they didn't have to spend a dime if they had went back and checked. So thoroughness, really paying attention to what we're doing, but I think for me, that's it. This guy right there, I see you, I got you, yep.
I was just curious, after you were found innocent, have you had any contact with Don's family or Thelma?
I have not. I did when Tim and I were first doing the book years ago, I was at Essex County Library. One of the times didn't show up, but I was there, and I met Eleanor Helmick, who was Dawn's aunt that was watching her that day. It was a very emotional scene. I never got to meet Tom Hamilton or the kids. I think this was one of those things that people get caught up in, and the police were talking to the children made mistakes, and it was Tom Hamilton said he was very sorry for what happened to me, but through the media, but that was his only child. And it was because of Dawn I stand here, I think, in some way. I work with murder victims' families. If you saw that last screenshot when I had my hands up when I was in the State House, that lady that was sitting next to me is Benita Spike. She's a murder victims' family member from New York who lost her husband to a robbery, who was shot and killed, who also opposed the death penalty as well. So we have a lot of things going on. I'm so sorry for what happened to Dawn, but in her memory, I try to make it better, so everybody will never forget her as long as I'm standing. Questions? Oh, okay.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you for your service as a Marine. You were fighting for our freedom before this happened.
There's a Marine too, right there. My dad was as well.
So thank you for that. Did you have any support in the prison? Any inmates or any guards that you were able to confide in and have some support system within the prison?
Well, basically when you go to prison, you don't really talk about your case. That was made known to me from the very beginning, but I did meet some people. Chris was Chris was really cool, and he had been there a long time. He had been in and out of prison all his life, and he would even tell you if he was alive today. But Chris took his own life last year. We had tried to work for a pardon for him, but him, and I learned so many things. Blue, he was in the credits as well. He's another guy. Blue was a man that taught me how to play chess, not in the conventional sense where we would play across from each other. We had to play in the cell, and then we'd call the pieces out. We both had both sides of the board, and we would set it up in like man, pawn, 4, and like that, and that's how you play. I don't know why he won all the time, but anyway, he was an African American man who was one of the leaders from the Nation of Islam, and he and I were tight, for a while, and he took 2 number 2 pencils and shoved them through his eyes to get to die. He wanted to die, but he was doing life without parole in the dark. But Blue is in the custody of the Maryland School of the Blind now. He's out. All he's blind, he's learning blind. They said he still beat me at chess, I have no doubt. But, I was a lone wolf too. I traveled that yard by myself through 2 different riots. You're also looking at a guy that stepped out in the prison population on his own, which was probably the craziest thing I ever did in my life. But I did, and nothing really happened. I mean, I got hit in the back of the head with a sock full of batteries. I got stabbed in the calf with a welding rod. I got hit in the chest with a master lock. Well, Jay's hit me in the head with a daggone set of tong shafts. It was harder than that. And but there's a lot of good men and women in these places that we seem to forget, and that have changed their lives.
Did you ever find out why the evidence was in the judge's closet in a brown paper bag?
Where are you at? Okay. Say that again.
Did you ever find out why the evidence was in the judge's closet in a brown paper bag? Sounds a little fishy to me.
Tim and I, we talked about that when we were writing the book. You know what? Nobody really knows. I think the judge just forgot it. And but I heard other people say that he might have kept it in there because technology might have wanted to catch up to it, and like science. And he didn't trust the state either. And that was a good thing, I thought. And I was so paranoid at that point because of everything that went wrong. And they were trying to win instead of trying to win the truth. So I can't tell you. Judge James T. Smith was the last judge I had, and he was the county executive in Baltimore. One of these days I'm going to ask him if I ever see him again. Question? I see somebody over there. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for taking my question. For those of you that don't know, there has been a case in Talbot County, and there was 1986, there was a horrific murder. In 2000, which was 14 years later, they arrested two men who have been in jail for 15 years, and I'm very close with one of the families of one of these men. Appeals, evidentiary hearings, etc. Innocence Project got involved in 2012. This past year, they applied for a writ of innocence after begging for 2 years for evidence that was slow in coming. There is no physical evidence whatsoever found at the scene. DNA, fingerprints, palm prints were linked to other people, one of whom is walking the street, and these men are innocent. And there was the writ of innocence and a request for retrial. Both were denied by the judge, the one and only judge in Talbot County. Hope he's nobody here that knows him, because I'll probably be in big trouble. Now we're waiting to hear, because the judge decided he wants another review of the court transcript. What can someone do as a regular person? I was at every day of this hearing in April for 2 weeks. The only way they convicted these men was on 15 years later, a confidential criminal informant came forward with ulterior motives because the family had a reward out. It's heartbreaking to see the family of the victim there 30 years later with all this being brought up. It's heartbreaking for the family of these men who have been in jail. What can a person do? What can, a society do, a community do? What can a person who just cares about a gross misjustice do? And by the way, Barry Scheck was in Talbot County. Did anybody know that? Because it never hit the papers, never hit the TV. I met him and shook his hand along with the 14 other Innocence Project attorneys who were sitting in that courtroom shaking their heads at this gross miscarriage of justice. What do you suggest?
Well, I would still remain vigilant about it. Obviously, I think whoever these men are have a great advocate in you. I can just listening to you talk about this, and maybe before this is all over, we can exchange emails, and I'll try to look into this. But I know Sean Ambrose, who runs the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, and if they're in their hands, that's the best people on the planet for them. If there's a way, they'll find it, and I'm almost certain of it. And just keep on plugging away. I mean, never leave them stay, and tell them the same thing.
Thank you.
Questions? Anybody else? Yes, right here. Yep, I got you.
What was the most difficult transition for you psychologically after getting out, after you released? What did you find was very challenging for you to go through?
Well, just the day-to-day things. It was like getting a job. I've always been self-employed. Pretty much, I worked at different places. I had a lot of problems. I remember I worked at a tool company in Easton for a brief period of time. I'm not going to mention their names, Black & Decker. And they, wanted me they wanted me to show my pardon. They wanted my everything in a pint of blood, almost, it seemed like. So how do I sign an employment form that said, have you ever been arrested for a crime before? Yes, I didn't do it. But, and I'm being flipped, but that's exactly what you have to do. All these exonerees, there is no Do you know there's no constitutional right after you've been convicted of a crime of innocence? Did you all know that? You do not have any more after that first initial 30 to 90 days is over with. You cannot argue in a court of law on your innocence in an appellate court ever. And if Tim was here, I'd have say, but it's you can't do it, and you cannot argue innocence. That's it. It's only technical merit alone to get you going. So it was really tough. Dating. Just getting a date, Let me tell you, people didn't talk about me in the fondness of things before I left. And so I get out and I go out on a date and I have a date and, well, Ma, you're a nice guy. Where have you been for the last 9 years? Well, I was accused of a brutal murder and I didn't do it. I'm the first DNA guy in the United States to be freed by it. Pass me the salt. She actually got up and walked out. But her loss. I'm just saying it's very, very hard. And there's no resources for us. Do you know they have resources? It's called a Second Chance Act for criminals, people who commit crimes. You get services, they get programs, innocent people, exonerated people, nothing. But we're getting ready to assail upon them. And I'm just tired of seeing it. Some of these guys got a lot of problems. And I'm not just talking about throwing $1 million at somebody. It would be great. But how to go to school, get a college degree, how to learn a trade, get a boat, buy things you want to do, go to a trade school. What did I have to do? I had to borrow and get everything I ever got. I didn't have any chance to get anything. And so we need to change those laws. Questions? Anybody else? Then we could, right there. Ruffner.
Were you ever able to talk to him for doing time for his murder?
We talked to everybody. I mean, basically, he was in the yard, he lifted weights, but, he hung around with other people with those charges. And he was what we call a rape artist. So that's what he did, And he was always hung up with those kind of guys, and they traveled around. I never liked those guys. And we all had to lift in the same yard. So you would tolerate people. The saying, like, you don't have friends, you have acquaintances. Well, he was an acquaintance. And prison's not that. You don't have no friends in prison to the most part. And, I never liked the dude. But, I'm looking for a 6'5" guy. He was a little thing. He's a little guy. We look like Mutt and Jeff standing next to each other. So, I wouldn't have a whole lot of good things to say to him at this point. I don't think. He's got his life sentence will not start until his 45 years is up for what he did do. And had they went back and checked, we wouldn't be talking right now probably. They would have arrested him, and this would all been brushed away like it was supposed to be. And he would have been convicted, and I wouldn't be here. But I look back at it in hindsight, and I didn't see anything. He told me when day I left prison, and so did everybody else, I heard him holler through the bars, good luck. And he was the key to a lot of things. I might be in a closet with him for about 5 minutes. I don't know if that'll do any good. Questions down here?
Did he know that you were the one that was in there for what?
He says he didn't, but, he remembers drugs he took the day of the murder. He remembered the murder. He remembered taking a vacation the next day. And, I think if you can kill a 9-year-old little girl, lying's not much of a problem. So I don't believe a word he said. Questions? Right here, there's a fellow.
You know, it's such hard work, your advocacy and everything. If this was to happen again, the only thing that's changed is you wouldn't be on death row, correct?
Right.
Are you doing any work out of having the idea of call, to change the situation that you've been through? You know what I'm asking?
No, I don't, actually.
So you took the death row out of it for you. You still could have spent the 8 years, 10 months.
Right. But I also could have died in prison from a stabbing, or I could have anything could have happened. It's, I got rid of the death penalty because we shouldn't walk over the innocent to get to the guilty. And that was the reason for that. That is a total number one issue for me. There's a man that I know, he's an exoneree from Florida. His name is Freddie Pitts. And on the back of those blue shirts, it said Witnessed Innocence. That's a group that I belong to. We're all death row survivors. And on the back of the shirt, it says, you can free a man from jail, but you can't free him from the grave. And it is a tragic thing that they would have to stay in there for life, like this lady was talking over here about these men that spent 15 years in. But I can't free them if they're dead. And may God's freed them from that. But, that's the quandary we're at. I think life without parole is the best option that we have. Now, honestly, yes, I do believe there's some people that should never see the light of day. Ruffner being one of them. But I don't want him executed. Accountability. We all have to live with what people have done in our lives and in our communities, and so should they. They shouldn't be taken away and not held accountable by being alive every day in that place. I think, it's a better thing that we do if we give them life without parole. Questions? I seen somebody. Jay?
I think on the last one, I think that's what they're saying. One more. I just want to say I'm Kirk Bloodsworth's nephew, and I want to say hi to Tim. Been a long while since we've seen each other. I think he was Chicago or Duquesne. But I want to reiterate on something that the lady asked you when you got out. How did you cope and with everything? He worked with me after he got out for a couple years, or a few years, and married into my family. If you could imagine like a dog being pinned up in a little box that was way too small for the dog, and one day you open the damn door and you tell him, take off running, and he takes 2 or 3 steps and goes, shit, what's going on? That's the way he was for a couple years. It's no joke. You just imagine being pinned up in something like that, and then say, here's a door, open the door, go fend for yourself, make a living, put food on the table. What time we were working together, we worked on the water for a while. He was working with me, and I've seen this. I've seen it, what he's done and what he's become now. I mean, there would be days that we'd be out there towing it, and shift for an hour or so, you wouldn't get anything done. These thoughts would go through his head, what had been on, and the phone would be ringing, and it would be either Tim calling, and that's when they started working on the book, and that's how long ago that's been. And to see him, I'm not saying mature because he was mature then, but mature because he'd been stopped up. For what he's become then to what he's done now, when he couldn't walk on his own 2 feet after being stopped up for almost 9 years, to see what he's done now and accomplish the things that he's done nationwide, and especially here in the state of Maryland and the people that he's helped, I think that's one hell of a run after you get out of the cage. What do you think? That's my boy. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, I was thinking about his kids, and I used to be able to put them on my hand like this. I can't carry you like that anymore, Justin, but back in the day, we had so much fun, and it gave me a place. But I remember Tim, you remember this, and so Tim was he was on vacation and somewhere, and I was trying to get him, so I talked to his wife. I said, you're not going to believe what's going on. I said, Tim said he wanted to have an ending for the book, and I said, I think I got it. And they just caught the real killer. And that's how we ended the book. And that's when I was with Jay when the phone call came across, and Ambrose wanted to see me. And it was finally, it was a vindication, man. It was almost like some magical moment in our lives back then. And it seems so long ago, but, and it was what, 12 years ago? Tim wants to speak.
Hey, buddy.
This is Tim
It's been a
Junkin,
long
ladies.
time, buddy. Oh, good to see you.
So I just have a couple quick anecdotes that I'll add to this lovely night. And it's great to see so many people coming out to see you, Kirk, and how great you're doing. So Kirk and I, well, when I'm writing the book, the Baltimore prosecutors are still acting like Kirk is guilty, and I'm like 2/3 the way through this book, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to end the thing. And that's when Kirk calls me on the phone, and I mean, he's crying. He's crying. Yeah, Tim, they got the guy. They actually got the guy. He's in the same prison tier. I mean, and there's so many miracles in this book. So the second judge in Kirk's series of trials was so concerned. He had misgivings about the verdict. And the protocol in Baltimore County at the time was after 5 years, they destroyed the evidence. And the judge said, you know what? Bring that evidence to my chambers. I'm going to put it in my closet. Because I just have a feeling about this. And so it was 8 years later that Bob Moran was able to find.
He forgot about it.
And so some clerk says something to Bob, and he finds the evidence. I mean, that was one little miracle. There were a series of miracles. But I just want to say, Kirk and I, after the book was written, we did like a 6 or 7 week tour around the country.
At least.
We had 3,000 people in St. Paul that came to see you. And the lines, I was the author, signing the book, and I couldn't figure out why we had these lines. I mean, there'd be like, people would be waiting in line for like 45 minutes, and they'd come up and they'd start crying and hugging Kirk, and it was like they had a cousin or a nephew or a brother or a friend or somebody who'd been exonerated. And it was like, I mean, do you remember that? It was unbelievable everywhere we went.
Yeah.
And then we did this one thing, Kirk and I, where we got invited to a Maryland State Judges Conference.
Oh, yeah.
We went out to Cumberland, and literally like 150 circuit court judges from the state of Maryland. This was before the death penalty was outlawed in Maryland.
Right.
They give Kirk a standing ovation.
Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know whether they were going to boo us off the stage or what they were going to do. And I mean, they were all so moved.
Even the U.S. Marshals shook her hand. They said, I know who you are.
And then there's the last little anecdote is Kirk is lobbying for this bill in Congress to get money for people around the country who meet certain criteria and could possibly be innocent, to get money so that those states could have the money to test the DNA for these certain potentially innocent people. And it's held up in the Senate. The House passed it. The Senate it's mired in the Senate. And Kirk goes around and gives a copy of the book.
That's right.
To 100 U.S. senators. And 3 weeks later, it passes the Senate. And it was, it was called the Kirk Bloodsworth.
You should tell them. What's the name of the program?
It was like the Kirk Bloodsworth Innocent Protection Act.
The Kirk Bloodsworth Post-Conviction DNA Testing Program.
Yeah. So
And
anyway,
I've met the 20 men that have gotten out from that program, one in Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, your story, man. It was a great movie, Kirk.
Thanks a lot.
Great to be a part of tonight's festivities. Here, Jay.
No, I'm done. He just took the show. I will turn this over to whoever is in charge. But give him a hand. What the hell was doing right?
I guess.
I'm going to invite him to go
Is
get
that it?
book. Yeah. Get that book.
Let Tim and Tim, you're going to join me out here so we can sign some books. And, look, I want to thank the Eastern Shore. And, you guys are great. They always say a prophet's never accepted in his hometown, but I'll be damned. I love the Eastern Shore and Dorchester County and this part of the world. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So just a second before you leave, the books are outside, so you can purchase them. Kirk's going to be here signing them, and Tim as well. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great night.